This is still a stock Gary Fisher Tassajara, but today we're going to change that. Thanks to all of you, I've gotten a lot of ideas on how to improve this bike and address some of the shortcomings I experienced. So many, in fact, it's hard to choose just one. For the first build, I'm going to keep the existing drivetrain, but replace the rear cassette with an 1134 tooth. Adding the extra range should help me stay in the middle range of the triple on the road sections. I'm hoping this can increase speed too. Another modification that could add to road speed are these Surfa Drifter 26 by 2 inch inverted all-purpose tires. There were a lot of great recommendations in the comments, but I went to my local bike shop, told the owner about the build, and he recommended these tires for the route. Lastly, I've switched from flats to drop bars, and of course this means I swapped out the flat bar controls for some micro new 3x7 drifters. I'm hoping the new controls will help shifting speed and braking performance. I've also spent some time adjusting the cantilever brakes to further improve stopping power. I ended up having to swap the bars for a different set once it was built, as the reach was just way too long for me. Now, a big part of this build is keeping costs low. So once again, here's the price breakdown. $150 for the bike, $50 for the drifters, cables, and new housing, $11 for the handlebar tape, $20 for the handlebars, $30 for the saddle, $16 for the cassette, $100 for the tubes and tires, $20 for brake pads, for a grand total of $397. You may recall, just to get this bike up and running in stock form cost me $310. I didn't include the cost of swapped out components in this build, so stripped the cost of the old tires, grips, cables, and housing. So that's build one. Let's take it for a ride and see how it feels. But before we do that, here's a quick reminder of the route. 15.3 miles, 1,772 feet in elevation gain, 3 road sections, 1 big climb, 1 moderate to flat ridge road, 1 big bomb, and 3 dirt sections, 1 short but intense climb, a flowy, chunky descent, and 1 flat to moderate downhill traverse. I had a lot of fun riding this bike. The drop bars felt great on and off road. The inverted tread on the tires performed well on the road and felt really grippy on the dirt. The combination of the two made the shakes disappear on the chunk, and I felt zero fatigue or numbness in my arms at any point in the ride. The only downside was that the shifters and rear derailleur could have worked better together. I was experiencing some trouble locking in the right gear from time to time. Definitely the most fun bike out of the 3 I've tested so far. For the second build, I'm leaning into an alt bike restomod. This seemed to be a pretty popular option in the comments. I won't be taking it quite as far as all of you, but I think this will be a pretty unique build still. Based on the performance of the last ride, I'm going to keep the Surfa Drifter tires. Those felt pretty good across all surfaces. Next, I'll swap out this old 3x7 drivetrain for a 2x9. I'll be using a Dior 2x crank with the 26x36 in the front, paired with an XT derailleur. This means I'll be running a Hollowtech bottom bracket. In the back, I'll be running an Advent 9-speed with an 1146 cassette. This should make this guy feel pretty modern, although I've had to swap out the 7-speed free hub for an 8 to 10-speed one. I'll of course have to lose the drop bars, an old stem to mount these surly corner bar knockoffs from AliExpress. These are some 700mm wide boy alt bars made of carbon fiber. Hoping they help address some of the ride feel and numbness from the singular hand positions. I've wrapped them in a combination of lizard skin bar tape on the tops, some used old grips on the hoods, and some Van Colt waffle grips on the drops. I originally installed a short P&W mountain bike stem, but the bars felt way too close, so I swapped them for a 100mm road stem and quill stem adapter. I've also swapped out the cantilevers for some V-brakes just to see if they make a big difference. Let's take a look at the cost. $150 for the bike itself, $100 for tubes and tires, $10 for cables and housing, $30 on a saddle, $108 for the crankset, shifter, derailleur, and bottom bracket, $96 for the rear cassette, rear derailleur, and shifter, $25 for the new free hub, $120 for the corner bars and bar tape and various grips, $35 for the quill stem adapter and the new stem, $40 for the V-brakes and levers. Add it all up, and I spent a total of $714. That is quite a lot more money than the drop bar build, but we have changed out almost every part on this bike. I think this build is going to drastically change the ride feel from stock and even the drop bar build. Only one way to find out though. Let's take it for a spin. This build was by far the most out there and least conventional. I was a little skeptical about how it would perform, given the gear range and bars felt more like they were for comfort rather than performance, but I was pleasantly surprised. The drivetrain allowed me to start slow on climbs, but continuously build speed. It really let me put continuous power down and made the bike feel fast uphill. The wide carbon bars gave me plenty of control on the chunkier sections and did a great job damping the vibrations. I did experience some numbness near the end of the big dirt descent, but only because the bars felt a little too wide. I'd like to bring these in a little bit. Because of this, I mainly climb with my hands on the tops. This is probably the coolest looking build of the 4 bikes. I think with a little tweaking, it could be a super comfortable fast all-arounder. The cheap pads I put on the V-brakes were terrible though. The front brake was barely working at the bottom of the big road descent, and I had to pull onto a flat road to stop. So here's the question. How do these two builds stack up to the gravel bike and the stock Gary Fisher build? The Gary Fisher in stock form completed the route in 1 hour and 27 minutes. The gravel bike did it in 1 hour and 23 minutes. The Gary Fisher drop bar did the whole route in 1 hour and 27 minutes, and the Gary Fisher alt bar did it in 1 hour and 24 minutes. The alt bar would have done the route a bit faster, but the brakes gave out halfway back on the road descent, so I went really slow after that. The gravel bike and alt bar bike were really good at the road climbs. The more modern drivetrains allowed for better cadence and reliable power output. Both the stock and drop bar builds shared the same 3x7 drivetrain, and this slowed them down. It seems my modifications did not improve off-road climbing. The gravel bike and stock Gary Fisher remained faster, where both modified builds were significantly slower. The off-road descent was dominated by the alt bar build. This is truly where the bike came alive. The stock build was surprisingly second fastest, although as I mentioned before, it was bone rattling. Not surprising, the drop bar bikes were the slowest at descending, although still very fun. The small road section that connected the two dirt routes was still fastest and most comfortable on the gravel bike. The lower average grade really is that bike's specialty. I suspect that my body position is a bit more aero on that bike than it is on the others, and at the higher speeds this factors in a lot more than it does anywhere else. Heading slightly downhill on the Sequoia Bayview Trail, the alt bar bike was the fastest. It beat out the drop bar build by 22 seconds, the stock bike by 1 minute and 9 seconds, and the gravel bike by 1 minute and 39 seconds. Now, prior to this test, I hadn't really ridden this trail in that direction before, so it could be that as I ride the route, I'm getting a lot faster, but I think the time differences are pretty vast here, so I won't attribute that much weight to the route experience. The Gary Fisher drop bar build was the fastest at the high-speed road section out of the hills and back to the flats. It wasn't the largest margin, but it definitely felt fast and was easy to get into a nice tuck to cheat the wind. I was able to hit 42 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour faster than the alt bar, whose brakes had gone out, and 6 miles an hour faster than the stock build. It's crazy to think the fastest time trialists on the road can hit this speed on the flats. So which build is best for me? And are any of them preferable to a gravel bike? I think we can rule out the stock build, and this one really didn't suit me and wasn't that fun to ride across any of the surfaces. Despite the slower times, I had a lot of fun riding the drop bar build, and its low cost makes it a pretty practical conversion to do. Although I initially had reservations around the alt bar build, this one really won me over in the end. However, the cost of the upgrades is starting to fall into modern used bike territory. In the end, the alt bar build virtually matched the gravel bike in road performance, and its descending chops were second to none. It truly was the best of both worlds. If you are looking for the best bang for your buck, performance and fun, this is it. What do you think? Which one would you have picked? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.